Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the League Racing TV YouTube channel for Round 6 of League 1 of Esports Masters League. We are back after a 6-week break, ready for Round 6 of the season here at the British Grand Prix. Joining me in the commentary box today is someone new to the League 1 and new to Esports Masters League, actually. As you guys may not be aware, QVR Daka, my previous co-coms, has moved up to the main series of the Esports Masters League, replacing Kieran McGinley, who's obviously moved on to the Challenger series. So joining me for the rest of the season is a fellow commentator of mine who's commentated on League Racing TV stuff a lot before. It is Luke Etheridge. Luke, how are you doing this evening?
I'm very well, thanks. Good evening, Aidan. Good evening to everyone who's watching at home. It's great to be back alongside you in the comms box. Great to experience what League One has to offer in the Esports Master League. I'm sure with half the season to go, there's some very, very good tracks left on the calendar.
Yeah, there really are some good tracks left on the calendar. Obviously, we are coming to you today from Silverstone, the British round of the championship, and this is probably one of the most iconic tracks you will find on the Formula 1 calendar and in the world. It is such an iconic layout, this track, with so many memorable corners, so many memorable races here in the past. And Formula 1 around Silverstone has provided some amazing races, both historically and in recent years as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, the two in 2020, for starters. The British Grand Prix had the Lewis Hamilton, Bottas and Carlos Sainz all getting punctures, and depending on where you got the puncture, it pretty much determined where you ended up finishing in that race. The 70th anniversary Grand Prix was one of the few times this season that Mercedes weren't outright the fastest car, with Verstappen taking his first win of the year. 2013 had the punctures, 2012 Webber passing Alonso late on. Back before our time, obviously, 1987, Mansell versus Piquet. There's been so many fantastic moments around this circuit, and hopefully some of these drivers will be able to provide us with some fantastic racing tonight.
Yes, and like you said, like we mentioned a little bit previously, this is the halfway point in the season now. We are through half of the calendar. The second half, some iconic tracks to finish off the season. After this round, we'll be heading to Belgium, Italy, Singapore and Brazil to round off the calendar. So these are going to be some amazing races to behold. Before we get ready, though, for tonight, I'm just going to quickly run you through the standings in League 1 as it is. Despite not scoring the most points last time out, despite Excel winning the race last time out at Canada, Clean Vigor's championship lead has actually extended. So it is now up to 36 points at the front. They're on 194 to XL Racing on 158. They passed TTG last time out, who are down to third, but only 5 points back, so it's still very close for second place in the standings. Those three teams have gapped kind of the rest of the standings as it is. Fourth place is currently held by Leonis, who are on 112. They are 4 points ahead of Clean Vigor Academy, who hold fifth. Equal sixth place at the moment between Virtual Esports Racing and OSRL. OSRL, by the way, have actually renamed themselves. They are now called International Racing, so look out for that in future standings. TTG Academy run 8th on 54 points. They are 4 points ahead of Vapor Esports, who run 9th, and they are 6 points ahead of OWR, who are at the bottom of the table currently on 44 points. So obviously you don't have a lot of experience in terms of League 1 so far, but just looking at the teams, are there any teams in the championship that you're kind of surprised by at the moment?
Not really, to be honest. The drivers that I was looking at for today's driver lineup were the ones that I was thinking they're really going to have a big say in the results today were, to be honest, mainly in the top 4 or 5 teams. If there is one team I'm surprised about, I would have probably expected Virtual Esports Racing to maybe be a bit higher up at the moment. They're currently tied for 6th in the championship, so I think they'll be aiming for a better half of the season and try to see if they can. Probably too late for them to get into the championship battle, but they can definitely have a say and maybe pick up some podiums and race wins.
Yeah, they definitely can. We'll have to wait and see if they can get into it. Like you say, we're just going to run you through as well the driver lineup for tonight. Obviously, one beauty about this championship is the driver lineups do tend to change each month. So depending on the track and depending who's available, the driver lineups do change. So looking at the driver lineups today, the Clean Vigor main team have Verstappen and Kuhnblad, 2 drivers that have already raced this season. They are racing today, and their reserve is Campbell, should neither of them be able to turn up today. International Racing, otherwise OSRL, otherwise known as OSRL, they are racing Joe Mora and URL Matthias. I believe both of those have raced before, and Steben is their reserve driver. Virtual Esports Racing are running Thyman and Zario with Quicksilver as their reserve. OWR are running Bear Remy and Bakis, and their reserve driver is Shumi. The Clean Vigor Academy team is running Dropia and Spaghetti Chips, and their reserve driver is QVR Nico. XL Racing team are running M Short for the second month in a row. M Short obviously race winner last time out in Canada, and he will be joined by XL Neo today. XL Zaldimer is their reserve driver. Leonis Academy are running Daniel and Ella Hausman, and their reserve driver is Patrick. Vapor Esports are running JT Gelato, who I believe it's his first race today, alongside Morgan, who raced last time out for Vapor. Vapor Trench is their reserve. Team TTG are running Scuba and Tamo, with Slash as their reserve, and finally the TTG Academy team are running Mashiro and Kiki, with Conti as their reserve. So looking at that driver lineup, obviously you mentioned some standout drivers you're expecting to do well tonight. Who on that list stands out to you as a possible race winner?
I've commentated on M Short quite a lot recently in different leagues, and he has been in top form, regularly qualifying on pole position, seems to be very consistent, and he got the win, of course, last time out, just before Christmas, so I'm expecting good things from him. Just judging on the form from last night, from TTML Division 1, Matthias managed to get on the podium, obviously completely different circuit, Britain to Bahrain, so I'm sure he'll be looking for some good results. I'd say every team on there has at least one driver that they'll be thinking, right, they can get us a really good result at the moment. So it could be down to the second drivers of who's going to have the cleanest races out of them and who's just going to be able to pick up maybe some of the lower points inside the top 10.
Yeah, exactly. This competition so far has been incredibly close. There's been quite a few race winners already this season. There have been some standout performances as well for some drivers that maybe we weren't expecting to be right at the front of the field. I think for me, on a personal level, I think Excel have really, well, pardon the pun, but they've excelled so far this season in where they are in the championship. They've done such a great job. 2 wins to their name out of the 5 races we've had so far, and both of those wins came from M Short. So M Short, like you said, is a very easy bet for a race win here today. But we know Silverstone is a track that pretty much everyone here knows really well. It's a very easy track to kind of bed yourself into. So this track, in terms of the actual field, it could be a lot closer than other tracks.
It could be very close indeed. The one thing which might have a bit of a say in the race, because it doesn't look like it's going to have a say whatsoever in the qualifying session, as we see some beautiful sunshine over the Silverstone ring, is the weather, of course. That could always have an effect, but yeah, it's one the track. The driver should be used to it. It's been on the F1 calendar ever since 1950 in terms of this layout. 2010 was the first time they used it, but back then the pit straight was on the run down to Cops, what is now a national pit straight. They moved to this new one in 2011, so it's definitely one the drivers are used to. It's one that I imagine, like you said, they enjoy doing. It's quite a high-speed circuit. We know in real life the drivers always talk about how fun it is to drive around here. It's quite an open track as well, but despite all the openness and the wideness of the circuit, it's not the easiest to overtake on, and that's just because the 2 DRS zones don't really lead into really sharp, heavy braking zones.
Yeah, they really don't. There's not really any heavy braking zones apart from maybe as you head up towards Village and down into the Vale Club chicane. They're probably the 2 biggest braking zones on the track, and they're not really in overtaking spots. So, yeah, like you say, it is pretty difficult to overtake around this track. Another thing to note about this track as well, despite the amount of high-speed corners, this track is really low on tyre degradation. So around this track, it's quite easy to push to the limits all the time.
Yes, definitely. Pirelli obviously bring their 3 hardest tyres here, the C1 and C2 and C3, because they know how difficult it can be. We saw the punctures in real life. That's obviously not really usually a problem around here. It should be a straightforward one-stop strategy, and you're going to want it to be a one-stop strategy because the length of the pit lane is extremely long. If you have to make a second pit stop, you're going to lose 25 to 30 seconds.
Yeah, it is such a long pit lane, especially with that early braking zone for a 37-mile-an-hour speed limit, like you say. So, really slow pit lane. You don't want to pick up damage around this track. We're on board, though, with Virtual Esports Racing's Feynman. He is currently our first driver onto the track, setting a time. So he's heading through the first sector as it stands, coming through there into the loop hairpin, probably the slowest corner on the track. Very crucial to get a good run out of this corner as you go through the kink of Aintree and down the back straight. Then we come down the Wellington straight, heading in towards then the first of the 2 DRS zones on this track, and another braking zone for Brooklyn's tightening left-hander, but it's quite open, this one, as you head into Luffield, one of the longest corners on the track. Really have to wait to get on the throttle. So easy to lose the rear of the car on traction there if you are too eager. Through the kink of Woodcote, not a corner in modern Formula 1 times as you head up towards Cops. Easily flat out in modern Formula 1 cars in qualifying. In the race, it might be a little bit of a problem if you're stuck in dirty air, but Feynman, as you can see, no problems as he heads up towards Maggots and Beckett's. He's got a bit of traffic in front, so hopefully they don't get in his way, although I think one of them is his teammate Zaria, so it looks like he might be getting a bit of a tow. Down the hanger straight then through Chapel and down hanger. He is getting a bit of a tow from Zaria. It's been a good lap from Feynman so far. Nice and neat and tidy, not pushing the boundaries too much as he heads uphill to the braking zone for Stowe. Means he can brake very late for that corner. tightens on the exit ever so slightly, and then down towards the Vale and Club chicane. Last few corners on the track, this one through Vale, and now the double apex of Club as we head onto the renamed Hamilton Straight for the final time. Crosses the line, and it's a 23.9 from Thyman, which puts him on provisional pole. And I was going to say the pole position around this track is probably going to be in the high to mid 23, so that is a great opening lap from Thyman.
Yeah, fantastic lap from Thyman, especially when you take into account there'll be some track evolution as well, so not a bad first run. Joe going into second at the moment on a 124.7. Very clean lap from Thyman, and that's always good around here. It is easy to pick up penalties. It's very easy, especially coming out of Stowe, is where you quite often see the drivers running wide and just getting it wrong on penalties, even coming out of the final corner as well. So you have got to be careful. That a very good lap by Thyman. Exo Neo going into second place and also on a 123.9. I think we could safely say you're going to need to do at least 123.5 to get pole position.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to have to be the case as Daniel goes into third for Leonis on a 24 flat, so he goes ahead there as somehow M-Short puts himself in between Thyman and Neo. So look at that, both Exile drivers separated by 0.06 of a second currently. They're very equal on pace. Obviously, a few teams running different liveries this time round. Excel obviously still running with their main orange, but they've shifted to an orange and blue livery from the traditional orange and white that we saw in previous rounds. Kuhnbly's gone up to 5th place for QVR. They're still running that traditional kind of turquoise lime green kind of livery that they're running at the moment. 5th and 6th as it stands. Verstappen really has been another standout so far this season. Has picked up a win, has picked up a number of pole positions, got pole position last time out in the wet conditions at Canada. Currently down in 6th place with a few drivers right in front. As Zario now goes 4th for Virtual Esports Racing, puts himself on a 24 flat as well. And look how close it is already. The top 5 separated by little over a 1/10 of a second. And at the moment, at least, Virtual Esports Racing are doing exactly what you said they might do, and maybe upping the ante a little bit here today.
Yeah, definitely. It's rare that I make a prediction. That's right. There's still only been 6 minutes of qualifying, so there's plenty of time in the remaining 12 minutes and the 26 laps of the race for me to have a bit of egg on my face, but a very good job from both of them at the moment, and good teamwork. I haven't really seen if any of the other teams have done that, but maybe there's just something to learn about there, because I imagine that little bit of a toe down the Hanger Straight made more than 22 thousandths of a second difference, and that is why they're on, well, Diamond's on top at the moment, Zario in 4th, and XL Racing looking really good as well in 2nd and 3rd position.
Yeah, doing a good job. 2 teams occupy in the top 4 spaces on the grid. It's VR 1 and 4 and XL 2 and 3 currently. Then it's Leonis Racing currently occupying 5th place, and the newly named International Racing in their striking blue livery now, moving from the red to the blue. Currently with the URL Matthias in 6th place on the grid on a 24 flat himself. So he is right in that battle at the front of the field. About a 10th gap then back to the QVR drivers of Kuhnblai and Verstappen running 7th, 8th. TTG Mashiro for the Academy team running 9th. As Morgan for Vapor has just gone into 10th place on a 24.2. He had a strong race as well last time he took part. He was running in the bottom end of the top 10, was maybe outperforming himself. I think he admitted himself that he didn't think he was going to be that far up. As Gelato is coming around the last corner, the last driver to set a time in this session, he crosses the line, goes P7, so that's another one in the 24 flats. And as I said, Silverstone, a lot of these drivers are going to be relatively knowledgeable on this track. It's not a track where you see big gaps, but look at that. 12th to pole position, 0.3 of a second. That is incredibly close.
Yeah, definitely. So close at the moment. I mean, you're looking at Morgan. He's 1,000th off of Bashiro, who is 1,000th off of Verstappen. And you've got 4 drivers there in a 124.26s. It is so close. I don't think I've ever seen that many be within, 6 thousandths of a second of each other. Ridiculously close at the moment. It suggests to me that other drivers are really on form. They've put plenty of practice in, and they've all set pretty clean laps early on, you'd imagine, except probably the exception of TTGA Kiki, who's probably just made a mistake somewhere and then cruised round to the pits. Going to be a very interesting rest of the session. See if we get some teamwork between the different drivers. See if anyone, maybe that's in the lower part of the top 10 later on in qualifying, thinks, you know what, I'd rather start in 11th place, get that fresh set of tyres, and see if I could just hang with some of the other drivers in the early part of the race. Because if there's any safety cars around here and you don't have to make that racing pit stop, that can save you a lot of time and really jump you far up the field.
It really can, yeah, if you're able to do that alternate strategy around here. While obviously the tyre wear's not that high, it's still an advantage to be able to start on the mediums, do something a little bit different, and we know how close the field is already. Having that alternate strategy might be the best way for you to gain places around this track. As we've mentioned, it is difficult to overtake around this track. Joe is going to take us on another lap then. He'll be the first person, sorry, to start his second run in qualifying. Currently down in 15th place on a 24.7. He's got a bit of time to make up if he's wanting to get inside that battle for the top 10. His teammate currently currently running up in 6th place. So we'll go on board then with Joe as he heads through the first sector, then comes up into this heavy braking zone in the first part of the lap through turn 3 and now into the loop of turn 4, then round the corner, nice and neat through there, short shot into 3rd to make sure he doesn't get any wheel spin on the exit of the corner, through entry and then down the Wellington Straight, then underneath the Emirates Bridge and then in towards the Brooklands corner. Is half a tenth of a second up in the first sector. Found a little bit of time. That at the moment would put him ahead of Dropia, who's currently 14th for the QVR Academy team, but he's got to find at least 2 tenths if he really wants to get himself up in that battle, maybe into 13th on the grid, which is currently held by Scuba running for Team TTG as he heads up towards Cops, then easily flat through Cops, tries to make as much room for that corner as possible, barely turned the steering wheel through Cops. He's squared that corner off really nicely. Now into Maggots and Beckett's, nice and neat here, flat out through Maggots, down into 7th and then down into 5th gear for the final part of Beckett's. Nice and neat again so far from Joe as he heads up to the second sector line. He's nearly 2 tenths up, so he's finding more time as the lap goes on. Now into the final sector, which is a lot slower than the previous sector we just went through. Heads up into Stowe really late on the brakes, was basically braking and turning at the same time there as he heads down towards then Vale and Club for the second time in qualifying. Joe is looking like he's going to set a valid lap time. A little bit late there on the gear shift coming out of the corner, didn't really get up to speed quickly enough, crosses the line, lost a bit of time in that final sector. Just goes to show though, tiny little errors like that in that final sector by not shifting up into 4th quick enough can cost you a whole heap of time around here.
Yeah, definitely. It's such a high-speed circuit that you really need to maximise everything. Thyman actually invalidated his lap. I've just gone on board with Daniel. He's a tenth of a second up coming through the middle sector point, which at the moment only needs to find a couple of more hundredths above that, and he can get himself into provisional pole position. So we'll follow him through the final few corners into Vale. Slight lock up there, easily makes the apex zone nice and steady through Club. That little short shift just gives him that extra bit of traction. And is this going to be good enough? It is indeed. By 47 thousandths of a second, Daniel takes provisional pole position, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of other drivers waiting to set laps. Obviously, we've not seen either of the Excel drivers do their second run yet, as you've got Cohen just going round the final corner now. Can he move himself up ahead of 8th place? Jumps 2 places, up into 6th.
Yeah, only 2 thousandths of a second ahead of Matthias. Again, really close in that mid-pack at the moment as both the XL drivers are coming around to start their next runs in qualifying. We've got, I believe, Hausman coming across the line. He's gone up the grid, then up into 14th for LR, so he's gone up there just ahead of Joe, just behind Scuba, who improved ever so slightly, but at the moment TTG 3rd in the standings, have won a couple times already this season with Perpetuum, currently down in 12th and 13th on the grid. It's not been a great start to qualifying for them as it stands. We're just going to go on board with a few more drivers that are further around their lap. Zario is getting a nice tow from his teammate Thyman as he heads up towards Stowe, but he hasn't found any time in the first 2 sectors as it stands. Can he find anything in the final sector with that tow? Currently 5th on the grid, only a tenth of a second game could put him onto the front row if he absolutely nails this final sector. Goes through the last corner, then up to the line, and he goes pole. Wow, that tow then down the back straights works beautifully, and that's immediately beaten by Matthias by 6 thousandths of a second. So without a tow, Matthias has been able to put International Racing onto pole position, but Zario showing that the tow around here is working quite nicely.
Yes, definitely. We've now got 6 drivers within a tenth of a second of each other. XL Neo just improving ever so slightly. He's at 74 thousandths of a second at the moment, so we'll see what he can do through the final few corners. Interesting point about the TTG teams is that Machero is currently the lead TTG driver, and he's obviously in the Academy team, so that's a very interesting point, a bit like the Alpha Tower who's beating the Red Bulls. At this moment in time, we'll see what XL Neo can do around the final corner. Lost a bit of time then in that final sector, can only go up ahead of his teammate, but M-Short is currently 2 tenths up, so by the way this session is going, this should take pole position by an absolute country mile. And there we go, wow. Nearly 2 tenths of a second for M-Short, a 1:23.687. Fantastic lap from him. And likewise with Matthias, achieved it without the slipstream.
Yeah, and that is a statement from M-Short. In a qualifying this close to go 2 tenths clear at the front of the field, that is a brilliant lap time. Someone else has just improved. I think that was Morgan that's got up into 7th place for Vapor. So he's now he's been able to put both of those Vapor team cars inside the top 10, so that's good to see. Gelato wasn't able to improve on his second run in qualifying. Still in 9th at the moment though. QVR, current championship leaders, leading the way by a comfortable margin, so they're not under any major threat as it stands unless they have a really poor performance tonight. But they're currently down in 8th and 10th, which is a lot lower than we've seen them so far this season, so they're really going to be hoping for a better second half of this qualifying session.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably the worst places to start with, I'd say, in Formula 1 are those 8th, 9th and 10th places, because if you're 11th, 12th and 13th, you get that nice fresh choice of tyres in the race. They're going to have to start, as it stands at the moment, on an older set of soft tyres. It'll be good for a couple of laps, and then those on the mediums behind would have a better pace, and you'd expect to be able to catch them up and maybe even pass them before the soft runners make their first pit stop. So it's just something for them to think about with how close it is at the moment. I mean, we're saying down in 8th and 10th for Cohen and Verstappen. Cohen's 2/10 of a second off the front row at the moment. It is that close.
It really is, like I said, 2/10 of a second improvement for Cohen could put him right at the front of the field. Verstappen a little bit further back, but just goes to show he's currently in 10th place. He's 1,000th of a second ahead of Mashiro, who's in that perfect spot at the moment. So Mashiro must be hoping that no one behind him improves, because that would be a great spot for him to start this race. And like you said, he's the lead TTG driver at the moment. So currently Team TTG, the main team, 12th and 13th, Tamo and Scuba will be wanting to get a bit further up the field. They both have raced so far this season. Tamo racing in Zandvoort, I believe, and was at the front of the field for the majority of that race before a late safety car kind of put pay to TTG's first win of the season. So we'll wait and see whether they can get a bit further up, but even they're not far off. They're currently 12th and 13th on the grid, and Tamo's only about 6/10 of a second off pole position and 4/10 off the front row himself. So just goes to show how close it is. He's back out on the track alongside with Daniel and Thyman. Thyman will be the first person to do his last run in qualifying. Early pole position holder has now dropped down into 5th place, so he'll be looking to try and find some time, but 3/10 of a second around here is going to be a tall order for him to try and get back onto pole position.
Yes, it looks like he's going to have to do it without the slipstream, although I think that might be his teammate just exiting the pit lane now. One thing as I've noticed is there's a lot of teams gone for dark liveries, so it does make it a bit awkward on the track map to try and work out who's driving for which team. But Thyman, he didn't set a second run, let's not forget, so he's got 2 runs worth of track evolution, 15 minutes of rubber being laid down since he did his lap earlier on, so he might get a bit of an improvement. I think getting up to first might be a bit of an ask, but who would have expected such a big improvement from M-Short as well?
Yeah, and Zario has come out of the pit lane actually directly in front, so he looks like he might be getting the toe off of his teammate. A little bit of a lock-up there from Thyman down into Village and then into the loop. Looking nice and neat though so far. That lock-up didn't really cost him too much. He still made the apex of the corner. See how his first sector is looking. He might get maybe a residual toe off of one of the QVR drivers in front. I think that might be Kuhn in front of him on the track. Actually, no, it's Verstappen, sorry, who's a little bit in front of him on the road, so he might get a toe off of the QVR driver through the first sector. Then didn't look like a too bad of a first sector from Thyman. As he comes through the middle part of the lap, then Verstappen I think is going to move out of his way just before Copse. Thyman decides not to tuck into his slipstream down towards Copse, focusing on the corner. Little bit of a slide on the rear of the car there from Thyman, so maybe running a really low rear downforce to try and find some straight line speed, just costing him a little bit of time there through Copse as he heads through Maggots and Beckett's. Each hits those apexes nicely, and there is Zario in front of him once again, so getting another toe. He's a little bit further back than his first run this time around, but it's looking like a good lap so far as he heads up towards Stowe, hits the brakes at just before 50 metres, really late on the brakes there from Thyman, misses the apex slightly but gets away with it, heads down then into the final chicane. Thyman is slightly up on his time, but a little bit of a lock up there into the chicane, and he's a bit wide on the exit, so that might have cost him some time. As around the final corner he goes, he improves by 1/10 of a second, goes back onto the front row, but that slight lock up at the end of the lap could have cost him maybe the opportunity to get onto pole position. Daniel will be the next person I believe to finish a lap. He's slightly up on his time, currently 5th on the grid. This slight improvement could put him back on the front row as he comes around the final corner, and across the line comes Daniel, and he stays 5th. He lost time in the final sector, wasn't able to improve, so he's 5th currently in Tamo, with a massive improvement from 12th on the grid up into the front row in 2nd place.
Yes, thinking about it, I think the Tamo might be another one of those drivers to invalidate his second run, so finding a huge amount of time, perhaps not too surprising. I was on board with Daniel in that final sector. I couldn't say I saw anything where it looked like he'd lost a lot of time, so I was surprised to see him lose about 1/10 of a second in that final sector, but I think that's just how close things are at the moment. If you're not absolutely perfect, these drivers have optimised their runs so far, and that is costing them. I'm just going on board at the moment, trying to see who one of the next drivers coming across the end of the lap is. We've got Kiki's going towards the checkered flag at the moment, but he's actually invalidated. So I think Halsman, he's going to be the next driver across the line. We'll see what time he can do. Goes up into 11th, 124.216.
Yeah, good lap then from Hausman into that crucial 11th place spot on the grid. One person I did notice made a mistake on his lap was Kuhn Bly. He ran into the gravel on the exit of Lovefield, so he's not going to be improving on his time currently 9th on the grid. Zario coming up to the line, goes onto the front row with a 23.7, so a good lap from him, puts himself right up there, but still no one able to challenge M Short just yet. We've got a few more people coming up to the line. We'll wait and see who's coming around next. I can't see who that is crossing the line. That was Bakis who's crossed the line. Ojo Barar currently locking out the final row on the grid. We've got more people coming up to the line. Scuba only 11th, but he puts himself in that crucial position. Next across the line is Matthias, currently 5th on the grid. He goes up to 4th with a slight improvement, goes ahead of Thyman. So that's him onto the second row of the grid. Someone else just improved in the background. That was Drop here, I think, going 15th for the QVR Academy team. Morgan goes 7th for Vapor, so a good improvement from him. Gelato is the next person to cross the line. He goes 9th, so puts himself back right into that top 10 at the moment as Neo improves, and it's an all-XL front row as M Short improves his time further to do a 23.5, so that's solidified his pole position at the front of the field. We're just waiting for Spag and for Mashiro to finish their lap. Spag is next across the line, currently 16th, goes up to 12th. Mashiro currently 15th on the grid, stays 15th, so he can't improve on his time. It's an all-XL front row, and I tell you what a time to do it. XL 1-2, QVR, currently down in 10th and 14th.
He's not the best of qualifying sessions there from QVR, neither of them finding time in that final session. Great performance though from XL. They were 3rd in the championship before the last race. They got themselves up into 2nd, partly courtesy of M Short's win. They'll definitely be hoping to close that gap at the top of the championship. It is 36 points, so it's probably too much to head towards the top in one night, but a 1-2 definitely go a long way towards closing it.
Yeah, it really will do. And obviously, we do run points all the way down to the bottom of the field if you finish this race. So that is crucial to this championship as well. You've just got to finish to score some points in this one. So it's an all-XL front row. M Short back on pole position ahead of Neo on the front row. Zario for VER in 3rd ahead of Datamo for TTG 4th. Then it's Matthias, Thyman, Daniel, Morgan, Gelato and Kuhnblai, the lead QVR driver, in 10th on the grid. Then it's Scuba, Spag, Hausman, Verstappen, Mashiro, Dropia, Kiki, Joe Mora, Bakis and Beremi round off the grid. Bakis and Beremi for OWR locking out the final row of the grid. And look at that, the top, I believe, 13 on the grid were separated, I think, by just under 7/10 of a second. So that is incredibly close. So I think even a slight mistake around this track in the race could cost you a whole heap of positions.
Yes, it will. And the advantage of starting outside the top 10 has just disappeared, absolutely, because we have got rain around this circuit. We are going to have to, I imagine, by the looks of things, it looks like intermediate tyre weather at this moment in time. So that's going to make things very interesting indeed. So I'd be a bit worried if I was a few of those drivers we were on board with. Thyman is one that sticks to mind. He already looked as though he was sliding a bit through some of these corners. Ideally, in the wet conditions, you want to put a bit more rear downforce on just to get that stability on traction as you're trying to put 900 odd horsepower down onto the tarmac. This is going to make things very interesting indeed. Probably makes it a bit more difficult to overtake. It's not looking too heavy at the moment, so spray wouldn't be as much of a factor. But we've already said no DRS around here makes it slightly easier to overtake. By no means makes it straightforward like it does at Austria and Bahrain, for example. This could be very tricky. You're going to be wanting to start at the front, and we don't know how long this rain is going to last for. Is it going to get heavier? Is it going to get lighter? Is it going to stay like this for 26 laps? We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, we really will have to wait and see. And once again, Silverstone throwing up some sort of weather unpredictability into it. I think this is the first wet race we've had. We've had a wet qualifying. Obviously, last time out, Canada was a wet qualifying, but we haven't had a wet race so far in League One. So this will be interesting to see who's been able to set their car up for these conditions. I will say, if these guys are set up for the wet conditions, a 23.5 in qualifying is a stellar lap on a wet setup. So I'm wondering whether these guys are thinking that it's going to dry out towards the end of the race. It's not very wet as it stands. It's damp. It's definitely a bit of spray, but we've not got anywhere near the standing water you would expect if you're towards the latter end of the intermediates, maybe the full wet kind of running that we would expect in these conditions. So these guys around this track, a lot of high-speed corners in the wet conditions, could be fairly easy to overheat these intermediate tyres.
Yes, definitely. Especially after the first couple of laps, you'll get a bit of a drier line appearing once the cars have been around. And then once they start wearing, this is where it's going to get interesting, because you mentioned there the fast times we saw in qualifying suggests more of a dry setup, suggests that the rain will stop at some point. It's at what point it stops. In qualifying, the drivers are only able to see the weather at the start of the race, 20 minutes into the race, and 45 minutes into this race. It could have well said in 20 minutes' time, after the start, it will be dry. That might mean it stops raining at the end of lap 1. It might stop raining at the end of lap 10. And it'll be interesting to see how long they can get these intermediate tyres for when it comes for that crossover point when you can put the slicks on. I think ideally a lot of drivers would hope that they can get away with just making one stop, and that'll be intermediates onto a set of probably medium tyres if it stops raining in the first 7 or 8 laps.
Yeah, if it does start raining, like you say, the medium tyres would probably easily take you to the end of this race. Be very shocked if we see people on the hard compound tyres around this track. It is such a high-speed track. Hard compound tyres really do hinder your speed around here, so it's very unlikely we are to see those in this race unless it dries out almost immediately off the line. But we're coming around to finish off then the formation lap. Who is your pick for the race win today, Luke?
I don't think I can really look past the pole sitter at the moment. He's looked very good in qualifying, improved on every single lap, kept it nice and clean, which might be the crucial thing as well. I'm interested to see what Thyman and Daniel can do, though, because they both looked quick, sort of made a couple of mistakes on their final laps, which is why they're only starting 6th and 7th. And of course, our championship leaders are down in 10th and 14th. Can they do a good comeback and try and limit the damage in this race?
Yeah, going to be really interesting to see, but like you say, the wet conditions makes it even harder to overtake here, and it's going to be crucial, a wet start to this race. Who has got the best traction off the line? That could be really crucial here on the run down towards Abbey, which is usually a flat-out corner in the dry. We are getting ready, though, for the start of the 6th round of League 1 of Esports Masters League. Lights are out and away we go, and our championship leaders already have a setback. QVR Verstappen has jumped the start, so that's a drive through immediately for them. M Short, though, off to a great start from pole position. Neo holds on to 2nd place. It's Datamo that's had a good start. He's trying to have a look at Neo down towards the corner. We've already got a virtual safety car as Morgan from 8th place on the grid has spun off the road and has got a time penalty for a collision with Hausman. Thyman's also got a time penalty for a collision with Matthias, so a lot of drivers picking up time penalties because of a contact underneath that virtual safety car. The XL driver is able to hold on to the front 2 positions. Datamo with a good start up to 3rd, but crucially Verstappen needing a comeback in this race already with a setback and a drive-through.
Yes, absolutely crazy start there. Verstappen, he looked as though the penalty came up pretty early to when the lights were coming out. Obviously, it might have been slightly different for the drivers. So many drivers getting severe collisions as well under virtual safety car. I think part of that's just due to the wet conditions. If the driver in front slams the brakes on, you've got to react pretty much instantaneously, and you've not got that same grip, especially if you don't use anti-lock brakes. It's going to be even that bit tougher. So might have been nicer for them if the in-game stewards had waited a few corners before putting the virtual safety car out and just letting the field spread out ever so slightly, because I don't think heading into the village and the loop was the best idea to chuck the yellow flags. But anyway, we're back to green racing, and Datamo looking like he's all over the back of Neo at this moment in time. So could we see a move down towards Stowe?
Meanwhile, Thyman's missing end plates on both sides of his front wing, so obviously he picked up damage under that virtual safety car. That is a disaster for him. Matthias trying to move on Zario here, can't quite get the move done. Daniel's there in 6th place, trying to pick up the scraps if he can get in there as well. With Spack now goes up into 8th place. He passes Thyman. Thyman getting a little bit blocked there from the pit lane by Verstappen. They're both in then. Verstappen in for a drive-through. Front wing change for Thyman. So VER's great qualifying, compounded by damage at the start of this race. M Short sets the fastest lap of the race. Hausman into the pit lane as well for a front wing change. Don't be fooled by those changes in the order. That is just a timing glitch on our end. But M Short is your race leader then. From Neo, running in 2nd place to Tamo in 3rd for TTG. Good start for Tatamo from 4th on the grid. Gained the place almost immediately off the line. Matthias runs in 5th place at the moment, just behind, I believe he's running just behind Zario for the VER, so he's holding the flag at the moment in 4th place. Matthias in 5th, Daniel in 6th. Bit of a gap there back to Gelato in 6th place in this race currently for Vapor. 7th place is Spag for the QVR Academy team. He's had a great start in this race as well. He's up to 7th place, I believe. Yeah, he's actually up to, I think he's up to 8th place, sorry, in this race, not 7th. He's up into 8th place, and I believe he started this race a little bit further down the field. He did. He's gained 3 places. Mashiro, though, the big gainer on the first lap, up 5 places and into 9th place.
And managing to keep it clean, because it looked like all that chaos was sort of happening from 5th, 6th downwards. Obviously, that was Thyman getting damage, but around 8th and 9th place, where Morgan obviously spun, and I'm not sure whether he was then hit by Hausman, and that's what caused the penalty and all of that, because I'm just checking. You would have expected Morgan to be a long way ahead of Hausman, so interestingly that those two managed to come together in the end. Whether it was just, like you said, a really bad start in these wet conditions can cause big problems. Everyone able to get through, though, without a retirement, which is good, so everyone has still got a chance to score points, and QVR, they'll be hoping now that Verstappen can work his way up the order. Likewise, VER with Thyman, because he's definitely got some good pace, and don't count these guys out. If they get this weather condition change spot on, they could still get themselves some really good points.
Yeah, they really could as well. And obviously with the wet conditions, anything can happen. We could see anyone go off the road at any point. It's so difficult to drive these cars in these conditions, especially on this game. With the new driving system we really have, it is difficult to keep these cars pointing in the right direction in the wet conditions. Just riding aboard with Zarya at the moment, we can already see a little bit of a drier line starting to form, but the rain is coming down quite heavily, so I don't know if it is going to dry out that quickly in this race. It looks like it might dry out a bit further into it, but we're not seeing a lot of spray, so that suggests that it's relatively close to crossover conditions already, so these intermediate tyres really are going to struggle in these conditions, and you can see the top three already starting to gap the rest of the field a little bit.
Yeah, they are. They're not doing a pretty good job at the moment. I mean, the fastest lap by M-Short was a 1:37.6. If you take about 5 or 6 seconds off for fuel, you can say a 1:31. That's not too far off a dry time, if we're being perfectly honest. I think it is just because the rain's coming down a bit too heavy. As soon as this rain stops, it's only going to be 2 or 3 laps, I reckon, before you'll be seeing dry tyres. As Scuba has managed to get ahead of Cohen Blige. That is very close there, coming through Maggots and Beckett's, but that's how Scuba into the top 10 at this moment in time, and the QVR driver all over the back of him. Needs to make sure he doesn't do a bad exit, though, because Dropya's not too far behind, and maybe, just maybe, he might try and work his way up the order. The Academy driver, obviously both in clean vigor racing, but I'm sure if Dropya had a chance to go for an overtake, he definitely wants to take it.
Yeah, definitely would. Obviously, the Academy team are in their own little fight at the moment with Leonis for 4th place in the standings. There's only 4 points between them, so they're going to try and score as many points as they can as well, especially with Daniel up in 6th place, scoring good points for them so far, but Hausman down in 19th currently, so a little bit of a split there. Spag and Dropya for the Academy team running 8th and 12th. Scuba looking low, that he's trying to get a move on with it. He's all over the back of Mashiro already, and Mashiro looks like he might be moving out the way he does. Scuba goes around the outside. Obviously, Mashiro in the Academy team, Scuba in the main team. Scuba's inside the top 10, but he does have a penalty for collision underneath that virtual safety car, so that will hold him back when we get to the pits. Verstappen fastest lap of the race, but currently down in 17th position after that drive through, quite a way off the back of the queue in front. Kiki with a time penalty for extending coming out of Aintree, I believe, so that's the first person we've had a time penalty in terms of track limits in this race. Scuba though up to 9th, good start to this race despite that penalty. Dotamo up into 3rd as well, so despite maybe a relatively poor qualifying in total for TTG, they're starting to work their way forwards a little bit as well.
Yes, and Scuba will be hoping that he's able to work his way onto the back of this train, which is currently being led by Zario. He's dropped now 2.6 seconds behind Atamo, and he's got Matthias, Daniel, Gelato and Spag and Chips not too far behind him at the moment, but Dirty Air's a lot worse on this game. We've said that before. Codemasters have made it more realistic. Of course, it makes it more difficult to overtake, especially in these conditions. You are really relying on that downforce. You're being a lot more careful on the throttle. They are allowed to use assists in League One, unlike the Premier Division, where they've got to do it old school, no assists whatsoever. So they're not doing too well at the moment. We haven't really seen too many collisions or incidents outside that lap 1, and especially with only 1 track limit penalty so far. They're all doing a good job keeping it out on track, but the XL drivers just looking very quick at the moment. They're swapping fastest laps between each other. It's now M-Short's turn. They're at a 1:37.0. Starting to try and pull away from Dotamo, but he's just staying in contact for now, so would be in a pretty decent position. Maybe if we do see the weather stay like this, he might be in a good position to think about an undercut.
He definitely would, yeah, and I think the XL driver's best friend at the moment is probably Zario. Zario holding up quite a queue of drivers behind that. Obviously, like we said, it's difficult to overtake. They're not going to be able to get their full pace out of these intermediate tyres, so it's just allowing the top 3 to disappear up front a little bit more. I will say there's a little bit of a gap forming now back to Gelato in 7th place. He's not quite on the back of Daniel. You've got to say maybe in this queue, Daniel looks like the one that's a little bit out of position. He looks really fast. It's all over the back of Matthias and has been really since the start of this race. Has almost full ERS as well, so he's just not been able to find a way through. Currently 6th place for Leonis then. A bit further down, Scuba is closing in rapidly on the back of Spag. That gap is already down towards a second, so suggests to me that if Scuba when Scuba is in clean air, he's very fast, but as soon as you get into that dirty air, there's barely anywhere that you can make any progress.
Yes, but saying that, we have seen him get ahead of Cohen earlier, so maybe he's just got a bit of an idea of where to get past the cars, do it in a place they're not expecting. Just been looking at the ERS for some of the top drivers. It looks like Dotamo is actually using quite a lot just to stay in contact at the moment. He's on about 35% as he exits Vale. Compare that to the 2 XL drivers, which are in the high 70s, low 80%. It suggests he's having to push really hard to just stay in contact, which is okay for now. It's later on in the race when he wants to go for an attack or a defensive move perhaps, if some cars do catch him up, he might not have a lot to fight with.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to look out for later on in this race. It is relatively easy to save ERS in these wet conditions because obviously you are not on the throttle anywhere near as much as you would be in the dry, and you're on the brakes a lot earlier. So it's fairly easy to save up, but like you say, he is using a lot to try and keep up with those 2XL drivers. You've got to say out of those 2XL drivers, M-Short looking a little bit more comfortable now as the race goes on. Fastest first sector for him. As Gelato's made a mistake, unfortunately, I think for Vapor, he's had a little bit of a spin maybe coming out of Aintree. He's got going again. He's down into 9th place. He just holds on to 9th ahead of Mashiro, but that drops him behind Spag and Scuba, so they're both up a place. And so far, Vapor, after a good qualifying, Gelato's lost places because of a half spin, and Morgan with damage on the first lap. It's really been a struggle in the race so far for them.
Yes, Hayden was in the chat saying, come on, Vapor, lads, and I don't think they'll appreciate that so much at the moment because it seems to have been a bit of a jinx. As, is that Diamond's off in the gravel? Diamond's gone off going through Abbey. I'll just see if he's managed to keep it out of the wall, because when we sort of went on board, and that is a very cool time penalty. He was not exceeding track limits. Poor lad's just trying to get back onto the circuit, but absolute nightmare race for him at the moment. And VAR looks as though if they are going to try and work their way up the order, it's going to have to be from Xavier at the moment, who still manages to hold off those cars. As Diamond has absolutely cooked his tyres, and somehow that didn't lead to a retirement.
That is when he's gone off the road again and he's hit the wall again. Yeah, he's really cooked those intermediates. We both mentioned that his car looked very oversteery in qualifying. So coming into the wet conditions, clearly that setup is not working. A spin through turn 1 in the wet conditions is a very odd mistake to make. So yeah, Feynman's race is pretty much over and done with. That is such a shame for him after a strong qualifying for VER. He's down in last place at the moment with another broken front wing. He's going to have to come into the pit lane and change that. He will be a lap down at this point. We're only on lap 7 of this race, so what a shame for Thymon. Currently running at the back, at the front of the field. Dotamo set the fastest lap of the race on that lap, but he's down to nearly about 20% of VRS, so he is really pushing to try and keep with Neo and maybe force Neo into a mistake of some sort, because at the moment XL look imperious at the front of the field. Tomo is the only one challenging them, and further back Zario started to gap Matthias ever so slightly. Maybe at the start of the race Zario wasn't quite comfortable in these intermediates, but as the race is going on he's looking more and more comfortable, and Matthias is struggling to hang on.
Yes, whether that's just as the fuel burns off, maybe slightly better tyre management, because he's been in free air for most of this race. Matthias has been really close to the back of him, so maybe Matthias struggling slightly with tyre wear at the moment. Xavier is still losing a tiny bit of time to those ahead, but it's now more about a tenth of a second each lap rather than multiple tenths, about half a second early on. Diamond now gets a pit lane speeding penalty and retires from the session. It has been a bit of a disaster from him, so they're going to have to rely on Xavier now, who is in a good position. He'll currently pick up 18 points if he stays where he is, but I'm sure they'll be hoping that Neo and Tamo might just start battling ahead, and maybe that'll just bring him back into contention for possibly a second place, and who knows, if M-Short starts dropping back, possibly a win as well.
Yes, Joe, meanwhile, in the second international racing car, has gone past Kiki and up into 13th place. There's a bit of a gap formed between Dropia in 12th and Joe in 13th, so maybe Kiki holding that small train of cars up just a little bit. He's now up into 13th place and has already gapped Kiki quite a lot in that final sector, so maybe he can start to get off that queue of cars in front, which is still stuck a little bit behind Gelato after his spin. Mashiro stuck in 10th, Kuhnblai stuck in 11th, and Dropia in 12th. None of them really able to make moves as it stands. As with the weather at the moment, on to lap 8 of this race, and it doesn't seem to have dried out whatsoever. It's kind of stayed pretty stable since the start of this race, which suggests it's probably going to stay like this for the majority of the race. So we're getting to that point in the race now where these guys are going to have to think as to whether they stay out and risk it going to the dry conditions, or come in for a second set of intermediate tyres.
Yes, I imagine there's going to be 19 busy Jeffs at the moment getting asked a lot about the weather reports, because you want to make the right call. Obviously, in these conditions, you don't want to be pitting for intermediate tyres just for it to stop raining 5 minutes later, because we mentioned in qualifying how long the pit lane is here. That's just going to ruin your race entirely if you have to do that at the moment. I'm just on board with Daniel in 6th position. He's looking really quick at the moment. Matthias trying to break the toe there, and if anything, that just slowed him down. Daniel just goes straight sailing past into 5th position, and also we've seen Spag drop back ever so slightly, so this train really starting to break up. Might be an opportunity for Scuba to move up another position as well.
Possibly, yeah. Currently on the back of the QVR Academy driver for 7th place on the road, and Daniel has been really all over the back of Matthias since the start of this race, but in the last couple of laps Matthias really has dropped off the back of Zario. Zario has pulled nearly a 3-second gap now back to Matthias. So in the last couple of laps, Matthias may be overheating his intermediates or pushing a little bit too hard, because he is just dropping like a stone at the moment. Spag is already within a second of him, and Scuba's directly behind that as well. So it's now all about what Daniel can do from here. And you've got to say, from the queue earlier on, Daniel looked like the faster of those drivers around him. And if you can close in on Zario, then it's not out the question that Daniel could still pick up a podium in this race, because Zario is slowly but surely starting to re-close in on second and third place.
Yes, it's again, is he just managing Matthias slightly better by being in that free air, whereas Guitarmo, he's now stuck behind the back of Exo Neo. He's got within half a second. He's able to keep within half a second. They're just not able to move any further forward. So that is a bit of a shame for him, but he's going to be in a fine position if he does think it's going to carry on raining towards the end to maybe pit. Not this early on. Probably lap 11 will be the earliest I reckon we'll see anyone coming to the pit. So that is a shame. Well, not a shame for him. That's going to be what they're going to be trying. It'll be a shame if it does then stop raining, but I think if it is going to stop raining, it is going to be the last 10 laps of this race now. It doesn't look like this is stopping anytime soon. It doesn't look like it's getting heavier, so I don't think the drivers heading towards the wet tyres is going to be anything to look at whatsoever. They've all just got to manage it nice and carefully, just try and be clean, try and not make any mistakes. We've already seen how slippery it can be out on track. If you have an accident into turn 1, you've got to cope with a broken front wing all the way around the circuit, and that is not ideal around here. We can see now that Zario and Daniel are both in free air there, trading fastest laps, getting into the 1 minute 36ers. They're doing very well indeed, and suggests that they are keeping these intermediates in good condition.
Yeah, definitely. I just noticed at the end of that lap, Zario using a little bit more ERS than he has done, but he's still around 80%, so he's managed his ERS quite nicely in this race as well. Daniel is already closer to Zario than he is to Matthias, so he's dropped the international racing driver completely, as Gelato is the next person to pick up a track limits penalty, currently running down in 9th place. He's got 3 drivers really within 3 seconds of him behind, so that would drop him well outside the top 10 if it stays like this at the moment. He's still running, obviously, the lead Vapor driver after a bit of a spin at Aintree. Morgan a spin on the first corner of the first lap, picking up damage. He's recovering at the moment, down in 19th. Bit of an update on those drivers further down the field. Verstappen came into the pit lane at the start of this race for a drive-through, having jumped the start. He's slowly but surely working his way to the back of the OWR drivers. That gap has gone down from about 15 to 5 seconds over these 10 laps, so he's slowly but surely closing in. But in front of 13th place Joe, there is a 7-second gap up to 12th place, and then from 12th up, it's relatively close. No one is more than 3 seconds ahead of the driver behind, so it's really close inside the top 12. The 13th down are separated, so if Verstappen can get up to 13th place, it's going to be really difficult for him to get any higher than that.
Yeah, it is, which is a shame for him. He's probably going to have to rely on safety cars or penalties. We've already seen Simon nearly have a safety car, have some big moments there out on track. So it's always possible that someone's going to get it wrong. Daniel
is flying
though at the moment, 136.611. That is 3/10 faster than what we've seen anyone else do. He's just cruising up to the back of Zario, and I think when he gets there, he's just going to dive into the pits, put on that set of intermediate tyres. The problem with that is, though, he is going to come out round about where Verstappen is at this moment in time, so the field's not spread out enough. There is that gap between Dropierre and Joe in 12th and 13th, but because of how long the pit lane is, there's not really space for anyone to fit into that gap, as Morgan has had a moment through Maggots and Beckett. He is able to continue, though, without any damage.
Yeah, and a good thing for him to continue as well. If he continues in this position, he will score a solitary point for Vapor, but every point counts in this championship, so if he can continue on, might be a bit of a lonely race for him, but it's still going to be rewarded at the end of the day. But like you're saying, Daniel absolutely flying. We've seen so far from him on lap 11 of this race, he seems to be the one, along with maybe Zario, that's kept those intermediate tyres in the best condition. They have dropped the drivers behind completely at this point in the race, so suggests to me if they do pit a little bit earlier, they may not struggle as much as some other drivers, because they've kept these intermediate tyres in quite nicely already. He's already on another good lap, is Daniel, using a lot of ERS to try and close in on the back of Zario. Still not drying out though. We're kind of in that middle ground really between dry conditions and fully intermediate conditions now. It's really going to be damaging on these intermediate tyres. Lap 12, surely we're going to start seeing people come in and try that undercut. I wonder if we'll see someone maybe like Scuba or Gelato or Mashiro to try and come in, and actually Gelato is the one to come in. So he's in at the end of lap 11 for another set of intermediate tyres. Well, now we get an opportunity to see how powerful that undercut is.
Yes, we do indeed. Of course, intermediate tyres don't wear out as much as the slick tyres. There isn't as much to be gained, and we can see that by drivers still setting fastest laps on their 10th 11th laps on those tyres. You would expect you to gain him a couple of tenths, so maybe just close him up onto the back of that group that he was in the middle of earlier, because he was doing well to stick with them, and he was doing well in that train until he picked up the damage. He is going to come out behind Verstappen. He's going to be, though, in plenty of free air down in 17th place, so could bump himself up the order later on in the race. And he's done 11 laps on the first set of tyres. When you consider the fuel load, 15 laps on the second set shouldn't be a problem whatsoever.
Yeah, definitely should. He's just got to hope now that it doesn't dry out before the end of this race, because we could see some people extend. As Kiki's had a spin now coming out of Aintree, he's lost the rear of the car, very Felipe Massa style when he had that tyre failure in 2013. But out of such a fairly innocuous corner, you don't really think about it. He's obviously maybe put the power on too early or got on the curb and has just lost the rear of the car. That's him in the wall and a heavy front wing damage. So a lot of drivers maybe starting to lose a little bit of concentration in some of these easy corners and just being caught out in these slippery conditions.
Yeah, I think it's very possible that he did what you said. I've done it many times. You just hit that curve for Aintree, you hit it too hard, you are a passenger, and especially in these conditions at such high speeds, you're not saving it whatsoever. Very lucky perhaps not to retire from the race and just get away with what is still substantial front wing damage, and still none of the really leaders coming into the pits at the moment. So it's only really Gelato that has gone early. Does that suggest we are going to see some dry conditions in the next couple of laps? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to wait and see if any of these drivers are saving their intermediate tyres for that possibility. Since closing in a couple of laps ago, the gap between Zario and Daniel kind of has stabilised now. They're not really closing in on the drivers in front. Zario has a big wobble there coming out of the loop just before Aintree, getting on the power a little bit too early. Yeah, like I was saying, the gap hasn't really come down between 4th and 3rd place in these last couple of laps. The one person that is really starting to gain at the moment now is M-Short. That gap between himself and his XL teammate is now up to 2.3 seconds. So M-Short slowly but surely starting to pull away. He's still in the 36s at the front of the field. It's looking fairly easy for him at the moment, as we've got another yellow flag. I think that might have been maybe for Gelato. I didn't quite actually see, but I think Gelato is still moving without any problems. So can't quite see what that yellow flag is for. Gelato, though, is going to have a couple laps undercut on the drivers around him at least. But I am now starting to wonder whether he's picked a little bit too early and is hoping that the weather stays wet. And at the moment, it might be drying up.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Just looking at a lot of the drivers' strategies at the moment on their telemetry, it is suggesting, as you can see by the blue spanner, that they're wanting to come in this lap. But again, the front three all carrying on. Zario, though, is coming into the pit. So this will put him out about behind Verstappen, and Daniel following him in as well. And it looked like Daniel was a bit braver on the brakes on the way into the pit lane there. Managed to get it slowed down to that 60 kilometres per hour, about 37, 38 mile per hour speed limit. They should put them out behind Verstappen. They should still be comfortably ahead of Gelato. We'll see if this undercut works to maybe get them onto the back of De Tomo. And of course, Zario, it seems like, I'm not sure whether that was just on my screen there, it seems like he's had an extremely slow pit stop.
I have to wait and see. I don't remember Zario. Oh, he really has. Has he had a front wing change, I'm wondering, because I don't think he had a time penalty of any sort. I don't remember Zario having a time penalty, but yeah, he is way behind Daniel in the pit lane. So Zario massively held up in the pits there, not sure for what reason, but his opportunity at an undercut kind of has gone with that. But look at the gap between him and Daniel, it's nearly 6 seconds. And he was in front of him going into the pit lane, so that is such a shame for VER. Everything just seems to be working against them so far in this race. Every time they make a step forward, it seems they make 2 steps backwards. So Zario out well behind Daniel. He's still 4.6 seconds in front of Gelato, so that's at least maybe 9th place on the road when everyone comes into the pit lane. But that is a huge time loss for him. Daniel's come out of the pit lane directly behind a battle between Bayrami and Verstappen for 12th place on the road. Verstappen has caught these cars, hasn't been able to make a move stick there through. Brooklands is down the inside for Woodcote, though, is on his ERS, and I don't think Bayrami is going to fight that one too hard. He's on the outside line through Cops, so they're going to try and keep it side by side. They won't. Verstappen's into 12th place ahead of Bayrami, but Daniel, crucially, is going to be stuck behind these two, and none of our top 3 decide to come into the pit lane.
No, the fact that they're pushing it longer, and I'm just looking, I can't really see substantial raindrops. It's very likely drizzling at the moment around this circuit. Are we going to get it to stop raining, and are we going to get soft tyres? And was it actually Zario, Daniel and Gelato thinking, I'm not going to be able to get these intermediates till the crossover point, I'd better be safe than sorry, come into the pits, put on a fresh set of intermediates, and then just hope the rain lasts slightly longer. Otherwise, as it's looking at the moment, this has been a big mistake for Daniel and Zavio. I'm just seeing they've said, TDV has said it looks as though Zavio's pick through wasn't ready. And that's how it looked on my screen as well. So I'm not sure whether that was a very late call from him to come into the pit, or because, of course, they're in multiplayer cars, their teammate in the game that they're sharing a pit boxes might not necessarily, but almost certainly, won't be the teammate that they're with in the league. So, for example, M-Shot and XL Neo are probably in two completely different pit garages, and that's always something you've got to think about in these multiplayer car races.
It really is, and I actually noticed that as well. Kiki was in the pit lane the lap before, so I'm wondering whether they've been caught out by Kiki being on-track teammates with Zario, and that has been the problem. So that is such a shame if that is the problem for Zario, that he's just been caught out by Kiki coming into the pit lane the lap before, and the pit crew still weren't ready for him. On to lap 15 then, coming towards lap 16. Do any of our leaders come into the pit lane? M-Short staying out, XL Neo staying out, Dertamo staying out. So they're all staying out then. It does look like it's drying up. In fact, the rain has stopped. The rain's completely stopped, so we are now getting towards that dry stage. It does seem like that either Daniel and Zario and Gelato thought the rain was going to last a bit longer, or like you say, they couldn't get those tyres to that crossover window. So from what could have been a possible podium for Zario and Daniel, they're now looking at the bottom end of the top 10 at best.
Yes, they are, and Daniel at the moment is trying to go all the way around the outside of QVR Verstappen. He's been forced slightly wide there, coming through Stowe. He's going to make an argument that was off track. They're coming together through Vale and Club. This is like Verstappen and Leclerc in 2019. They're still battling side by side at this moment in time, and Daniel just about manages to get his way ahead, but I'm sure there might be a few words afterwards. There's plenty of bumping going on. Zavio sets the fastest lap of the race, so that says to me, at the moment, the fresher intermediate tyres, as you'd expect, are be doing better. But Remy has come into the pit, so he has put soft tyres are. OWR bottom in the championship at the moment, thinking might as well go for a gamble. If this works out, could bump them up a few places as Hausman comes into the pits as well. So I think now we are getting to that crossover point. This lap or next lap, I expect to see most of the field into the pits.
Yeah, it's all Beremi that's actually done a Roman Grosjean out of the pit lane and has spun the rear wheels and hit the wall, so he's actually broken his front wing. So that suggests to me that it's not quite there yet, or he's just been caught out by it. Matthias now with a time penalty, and look at the gap between Matthias and Dertamo, now nearly 10 seconds. Matthias really struggling in the second phase of these intermediate tyres. They're still going. The leaders are staying out, so that it's not quite there yet for wet conditions for them. Does anyone behind try and come in? As Zario now picks up a time penalty out on track. Does Matthias come into the pit lane? No. Spag stays out. Scuba stays out as well, so it's still not quite there in terms of the soft tyres. On to lap 17 of this race, and just looking at Matthias, he is really struggling for grip now, so I'm wondering whether Matthias has reached that possible puncture window on those intermediates.
It's very possible. Daniel's going to try and do a switchback, though, on Joe at the moment for 10th place. Joe thinking that's a good enough sign for him that he wants to come in and put the soft tyres on. He's really the only one in that train to go for that. He just feels like he was losing too much time. We did see the gaps earlier growing on the end of lap 16. He's thinking that that's the time for him to come into the pits. Hausman currently on those soft tyres. He's the only one on the soft without any damage, and he is losing still quite a lot of time just through Luffield and Woodcut. He's lost about half a tenth of a second, so the right choice, I think, just to carry on this extra lap or two and wait until it's definitely ready for the soft tyres, because M-Short, he probably has a lot more to lose here if he gets this one a lap too early.
Yeah, definitely. He doesn't want to lose that lead that he's got at the moment. To be fair, if he put it a lap early, he's not going to lose a lot. Just riding aboard, though, with Hausman, Maggots and Beckett's there. Look at that, nearly a second slower than Morgan in that middle sector so far. So he's struggling on those softs as it stands. Good thing, really, for M-Short is that Hausman's directly in front of him on the road, so he can kind of measure how fast he is going on those softs and see whether it is the right time to pit. Does M-Short come into the pit lane this lap? No, he stays out again, so it isn't quite there just yet. Neo, though, is coming into the pit lane, and so is Dertamo. So M-Short playing it safe, staying out another couple laps. Second and third place trying a bit of a risk, and they've got the gap back to fourth place to do it. Does Matthias come into the pit lane? Yes, he does. Spag stays out, Scuba comes in, so it's a real mix of strategies at the front of the field. M-Short and Spags playing it safe, could get caught out by this.
Yes, I could. I'm just trying to look on the screen. It doesn't look like, well, we've now got the red spanner on Spags, but that could have been for someone behind him, or maybe someone ahead of him, and that's why in the end he was forced to stay out. It comes up with DRS enabled on this lap. That's going to be pretty worrying, and there we go. M-Short's got quite a long way to do on this lap. DRS enabled basically means it is dry conditions, and Spag, Cohen for our championship leaders, and Dropia for the academy, they're going to have to do this entire lap in what you've now got to say is pretty much dry conditions. This track, I'd say, is now ready for dry tyres.
Definitely, you've got to say, looking on board, there's barely any water on the track. There's barely any spray coming off these tyres at all. So it's very minute. I can see it. You might not even be able to see it on stream. I can see it with my eyes, but it's very, very tiny. So we'll ride on board with Neo for the first part of this lap and just see how he is doing as Kiki picks up a time penalty for exceeding track limits through down into Brooklyn's a little bit of a lock-up, but he's finding a lot of grip. And look at that, Neo nearly 0.4 of a second up on Dropia just through those corners. He's losing a bit through Lovefield and then gains a lot on the exit. So we're definitely towards that soft tyre window. Datama's lost a little bit of time to Neo in front. He'll be desperate to try and get in DRS range of Neo and try and hold on to those two, to hold on to the XL drivers. But at the moment, this is looking beautiful for XL, with QVR struggling so much in this race. Not really anywhere in terms of speed or luck. They are just kind of running in the bottom end of the top 10 at best, and XL could be looking at a 1-2 as M Short is into the pit lane. Mashiro picks up a time penalty. He's the next person to do that off the track. We've only got a few drivers left to come into the pit lane, and I tell you what, the likes of Daniel and Zario have lost out hugely. Daniels is now only just in front of Verstappen in terms of the order, and Verstappen had a drive through, and Verstappen's actually got the move done on Daniel down towards Cop. So Daniel's gone from a net P5 at least all the way down to about 12th or 13th in this race, as Joe Mora's trying to move on Daniel back into Maggots there, as Daniel's actually got front wing damage. So that's why he's dropping a lot of time. But my word, what a disaster it's been for Leonis in the second half of this race. Verstappen's worked his way in up another place, but he's 15 seconds off the Scuba in 11th place. So a lot of time for him to make up later on in this one. M-Shot came out of the pit lane a second ahead of Neo, so there was an undercut there, but M-Shot had enough of a gap to hold on to it.
Yeah, I was just checking the sector times there, and it did look as though like Neo in the middle sector had gained about half a second. What the advantage he now has, though, is he's used to what these tyres feel like on these track conditions. They will be getting better every lap. M-Short, probably quite rightly, is going to be a bit hesitant on this outlap because he's not quite sure where the grip is at the moment, as we now see Cohen pick up a penalty. We're starting to see more and more penalties. Says to me the drivers are just starting to push that extra bit harder as they're now on a dry tack, as the fuel loads are coming down. The XL12 is still definitely on at the moment, and you'd imagine Datamo's going to be finishing at worst in third place, and Matthias gaining a bit of time in that pit stop period. We'll see if he copes better on the softs than he did on the intermediates, because he was really struggling at one point there, as there's been a spinner coming out of Aintree, and that is Gelato.
Yeah, another spin then for Gelato's second one in this race, and what a shame for Vapor. It really has fallen apart, like it has for Leonis in this race. It's really fallen apart for Vapor so far. What a shame. That's them now in 15th and 18th, having both qualified inside the top 10. That is a disaster for them. At the front of the field, Neo tucked right underneath the rear wing of his teammate, but isn't going for the move. Would be done for those two to start fighting now, but look at that, a 34.3, well up on what they were doing on the intermediate, so it is easily dry conditions now. One person who's gained massively in that whole pit stop window is Mashiro. Mashiro, I think, pitted a lap earlier than the QVR drivers, and he's jumped the lot of them. So Mashiro has gone from a net P8 in this race up into P5 because of pitting a lap earlier. So that has worked beautifully for the TTG Academy team. And now that they're in a queue of cars really all within DRS range of each other, it's going to be really difficult for the QVR drivers to make much of an impression.
Yes, it is indeed. Verstappen's got some free air, so he's so far behind the other drivers as he sets the fastest lap. I feel like 10th is now the best he can hope for, unless there's some spins up ahead. Just ticking the penalties for Cohen. Well, Mashiro and Spag do have more penalties than them, so he could still get a 5th place, which I think he would have taken in the early stages of this race. I think he'd have been very happy with finishing in perhaps 5th and 10th for the team, especially with the way their lap 1 went, with Verstappen dropping a long way down the order, just limiting that damage that M-Shot and XL are doing, because they are currently on for the perfect 47 points to really trim that gap down at the top of the championship. We'll see though if Datamo still has something to say, because he's been behind these drivers since lap 1. He's not really had a chance to go for a move, and now that XL's in DRS range of his teammate, he's probably still going to find it very difficult as well. So if I was him, I'd think about where else can I get this move done. Perhaps into Village and the Loop, if he could just get a really good exit through Farm.
Yeah, he's going to have to try something a little bit different. The DRS zones aren't going to work for him. Another opportunity, maybe down into Cops. Fastest lap of the race again for Dertamo, 32.9. So they're just finding a couple of seconds a lap at this point with the track evolution. We've got 6 laps to go in this race, including this one. So not long to go as Matthias now the fastest man on the track. Make that as it gets faster. The further down the field we get, Kuhn Blei now with the fastest lap on a 32.2. As Daniel and Hausman, the 2 LR drivers, are going at it. Someone's gone off the road at turn 1. That's Spag. Spag has gone completely off the road. I don't know if there was any contact with one of his teammates, but he's gone completely off, and Spag is off the road again there. Actually, it was that Droppy that went off the road. I can't actually tell. Scuba, though, has got past the pair of them, so I'm wondering whether the 2 Academy drivers have run into each other. I don't know if they were next to each other on track, but Droppy's gone off the road, Spag's gone off the road, and Scuba's now ahead of them with no penalty, so all of a sudden, Scuba's now right in the thick of this battle.
Yeah, I was just on board with Dropy then, and it definitely looked like he had a lot of dirt on his tyres. So whether there has been a coming together, they haven't got any major amounts of front wing damage, as in we can't see with our eyes whether they have got any. They might just be on light green, of course, on their own telemetry. Shame for the QBR Academy team. They weren't doing too bad in this race for Spaghetti and Dropia, and that has freed Scuba, who without them penalties, if he works his way up to the back of some of these cars ahead, he could get 4th position, which would be very good, of course, for TTG, as they're aiming to close up, and that is someone else off the road there. I'm not quite sure if that was... Yeah, it's Kiki. I was just thinking that might be someone who's a lap down and needs to be very careful that he doesn't cook those soft tyres and end up in the barriers here. Neo there setting the fastest lap of the race, 1:31.7. These times are just going to keep dropping as the track gets drier, as they get used to the conditions. Maybe if it starts warming up a bit as well and we lose some of this cloud cover.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to get faster and faster as we go on, like you're saying. I think Kiki there proving that despite it being dry conditions, it's still very easy to lose the car in these conditions. So I'm wondering whether the track is still quite cool and these soft tyres aren't really warming up very well in these conditions. So he's off the road once again as Kiki, but still going, which is good to see, as Zario now picks up the fastest lap. But look at Zario down in 11th place now. What a shame for Zario. And Daniel down in 16th, having made, I believe, 3 pit stops in this race. That is an absolute disaster for them. So, a team that's benefited so far is OWR. They've qualified on the back row of the grid. They now are on 13th and 15th, which might be their best joint score of the season so far, if they're able to hold on to those positions, which at the moment, it looks like they're going to be able to do that with ease, especially with Gelato with a time penalty, and Daniel well off the back of Bearemi in this race. Bit further up the field, though, Scuba's not really making that much of an impression on Kuhn Blei in front, and if anything, Spag is starting to reclose in on the back of him. So if Scuba's going to want to try and get these places on the drivers in front, he's got to up the ante, and he's got to hope that the drivers in front maybe pick up another penalty.
Maybe, just maybe, Scuba went with a bit more of a wet setup than some of the other drivers. He was quite low down in qualifying to what I would have expected, to be honest. In 11th position, he looked really quick in that first part of the race. Now you can see him just losing a bit of time as Cohen Blige gets his way past Machero, so past the TTG Academy driver up into 5th place. Doesn't need to get ahead of Matthias. Well, actually, he does, sorry, need to get ahead of Matthias, so we'll now see if he can catch up on those slightly fresher tyres as Zario works his way past Verstappen. Zario proving that he's got a lot of pace at this moment in time. He needs to pull out a 3-second gap, though, if he wants to get inside that top 10.
Yeah, that's Verstappen down a place on the road as Zario has a big lock up there into the Vale chicane, but gets away with it. Yeah, Verstappen was a good couple of seconds ahead of Zario, so I'm wondering whether he made a mistake. And look at that, a 29.6 from Zario. By far the fastest lap of the race of the race so far, half a second quicker than what Kuhn Blei managed just a few seconds ago. He's got 1.7 seconds to Matthias. I'm wondering whether Matthias is one of those drivers that ran a bit more of a dry setup, because in the wet he was really struggling. Right now he looks a lot more comfortable in these conditions. He's not under pressure from the drivers behind, and they're not really closing in on him, so he looks a lot better in the dry, at the front of the field. The top 3 are separated by less than 7/10 of a second. Dertamo's trying everything he can to try and break this XL train, but at the moment XL are planning this beautifully. Emma Short staying in the lead, holding Neo within DRS range, is just allowing them to stay in 1-2 at the moment.
Yes, he is indeed. I was about to say that's the best thing that they can do at the moment, is just make sure Emma Short doesn't drive away from Neo. Otherwise, he's going to be under some big pressure from Dertamo, who did get really close into Brockman's last time around. He was only about a 10th of a second behind. He just hasn't really got that spare ERS at the moment, like we mentioned at the start of the race, to work his way up and maybe use that just to help him give an extra speed boost as well. So XL have driven this race absolutely perfectly and qualifying as well. They've been 1-2 the entire way through as Dertamo sent one up the inside there of XL Neo. I said that might be the type of move that he needs to do. I don't think I meant quite as aggressively as that here, and I think it's going to be all in vain because he's going to run out of ERS, and Exo Neo's going to have the inside line for Brooklands, who can hold it off round the outside. They made contact, and Neo goes round. Such a shame after such a good race from him. He's able to continue without any damage. He will be in third place. I'm sure there'll be some afters in the stewards after that. The first move looked a bit of a dive bomb, and I think the second one, I don't think Tamo realised that Neo's front wing was still alongside him, if I'm being perfectly honest. We'll have to see what they say. Now, can the TTG driver close up to the back of M-Short, knowing that M-Short doesn't have the DRS, but he has broken that 1 second window at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think now that Dotamo's in second place, M-Short is going to unleash the speed we know he has, and it will start to see him maybe drive away, and he's got a lot more ERS than Dotamo as well, so that will help him around the track with so many high throttle areas. Neo is very, well, actually, I wouldn't say lucky. It's very smart from M-Short and Neo that they had such a great wet run, because they can afford a mistake like that and still somewhat get away with it. Unfortunately, they will not finish 1-3 unless we get some sort of penalty after this. They will not finish 1-2 unless we get some sort of penalty after this race, but they had enough of a gap back to the chasing pack that they could get away with it. Neo, that was such a light tap on the front wing. I will say Dotamo turned in, like you say, maybe not expecting Neo to still be there, but even so, the tap on the front wing of Neo's car was incredibly light, but it still managed to spin him around. So I'm amazed that he ended up spinning that car, but he's lucky to get away with it. Matthias in fourth place might have sniffed a little bit of blood there, but is still over 5 seconds back, so not really anything's going to come of that unless another mistake comes from Neo. We've got a lap and a half left in this race. Kuhn Bly, since getting up into 5th place, hasn't been able to close in on Matthias, so at the moment it looks like QVR's best result in this race could be 5th.
Yes, it could be at the moment. There has been some moves further back though while all that was going on. Droppier's got ahead of Spag, so it's doing really well for QVR Academy at the moment in 8th position. We'll see if he can work his way past Scuba, who really hasn't been able to close up to those drivers up ahead. I think Tamo's definitely getting probably going to end up getting a penalty that. A, for the first move, because Neo's just going to say I didn't expect it to come, and then B, it might have been a very light tap. Only a slight bit of Neo's car was alongside, but Tamo, I think, sort of turned in, expecting Neo just to give up the position there. So you'd say at the moment that's a 10-second penalty coming to Tamo's way, which would only drop him that 1 place, of course.
Yeah, it would only drop him in 1 place, but that is kind of put paid to what was a really great battle. Meanwhile, further back, Droppier's going for a move here on Scuba down into Stowe. He's up into 7th place, past Scuba on the road, but at the moment that's kind of all in vain because Scuba still doesn't have a penalty in this race. Neo with the fastest lap as he tries to recover on a 27.6. Droppie then up into 7th place, but that will drop back down into 8th if this race finishes like this without Scuba getting a penalty in this race. Further back, Zario has dropped Verstappen out of his DRS range, but there's not enough of a gap for him to be able to hold on to that 10th place unless Verstappen makes a mistake. So, as it stands, XL are going to massively narrow the gap, but QVR are just about going to hold on to the championship lead.
Yes, they are indeed. Kiki picks up a penalty, and we're going to see a move further back. Damage limitation for Daniel in the DRS of Bear Army, and the OWR driver deciding that he's not really worth battling at the moment. Daniel up into 15th, what could have been for him. A, if he hadn't have pitted onto a set of intermediates with the rain stopping 5 minutes later, and B, if he hadn't have got that front wing damage, because Zavio, despite having made that pit stop, still recovered to 10th position, which wouldn't have been the finish he'd have been hoping for, but still pretty good damage limitation, as you can see there, 1:27.0, setting the fastest lap. He's absolutely flying. One man has been flying all day, so is M-Short, and it looks certain he's going to take his 2nd win of the season in a row.
Yeah, 3rd of the season, 2nd in a row, won last time out in Canada in emphatic style, and this time around it was a lot closer battle with his teammate in Dertamo, but M-Short once again is going to come out on top with the fastest lap of the race on the final lap. M-Short is a race winner for the 3rd time this season. He's won half the races in this championship. What a drive from the XL driver. Dertamo tried his best but couldn't get close enough, and there might be a penalty coming his way after this race. Neo, having run 2nd for the majority of that race, caught out after contact late on, drops down into 3rd, but that could likely become 2nd in the stewards room. Matthias gets 4th place, a good recovery from a poor showing in the wet conditions. Kuhn Bly gets 5th ahead of Scuba, who jumps to 6th. Droppia in 7th ahead of Mashiro. Spag ends up in 9th place, and Verstappen in 10th, having got a drive-through at the start of the race. It's a good recovery, but what could have been for him as well? We could have been well inside the top 10 without that mistake at the start. Zario with a pit with a 2 pit stop race in that one, having pitted for the intermediate tyres midway through, was the wrong strategy call, and he can only manage 11th. As Joe Mora gets 12th for international racing as well. Back is an OWR in 13th. I think their best result of the season so far. Gelato steals the fastest lap of the race on the final lap. Something at least for Vapor to smile about after such a disappointing race for them. Daniel, like you said, what could have been for him in 15th, Bearemi in 16th, and now we just wait for Hausman, Morgan and Kiki to finish the race. Kiki finishes a lap down on nearly everybody in the field, but still finishes the race and gets a point. Morgan will cross the line in 18th place for Vapor. What an up and down race for a lot of drivers, and the weather really played havoc in that one, but in the end, M-Short overcame every single thing that was thrown at him and won that race quite easily.
Yeah, great performance there from M-Short. He'll be really happy with how he did. Pulled that gap in the rain, which proved to be crucial as he went a lap longer. Maybe, just maybe, if he'd have only been about half a second further back, that could have been the difference, and then we could have seen some real battling between the top three. Shame for what happened between Desarmo and Neo, and I'm sure, like we said earlier, the stewards might have something to say about that. I'm just quickly trying to work out the maths on the positions at the moment. It was 45 points that XL got in this race, and I believe it was 5th and 10th, wasn't it, for QVR, so that's going to put them on 27 points. That's 16 points now, QVR are leading, and that might change, of course, if there are any stewards' inquiries.
Yeah, definitely could. That gap could get even smaller, and that is a big boost for XL now, who have been kind of running in that second place, or battling for second place with TTG all season long. QVR have had the lead since the first round. This is the first time this season we've really seen QVR struggle compared to their fellow teams. It wasn't a bad race by any stretch of the way, but it could have been so much more for QVR today. Here's the final results then. M-Short winner of the race ahead of Tamo in Neo, but that is likely to swap in the stewards' room. Matthias in 4th for international racing ahead of Kuhnblai. From 10th on the grid, the best that QVR could manage today was 5th. Scuba in 6th ahead of Dropia, Mashiro, Spag and Verstappen recovering from an early drive-through. Zario, Moira, Bakis, Gelato, Daniel, Bearemi, Hausman, Morgan and Kiki are your finishers, and Thyman, having qualified 6th, spun very early on in this race, damaged his front wing and retired from the race. So you said at the start of the stream that VER could kind of work their way a bit further up the field today, but strategy calls and wrong setups really put paid to what could have been a great race for them as well.
Yes, in qualifying they looked absolutely fantastic. It's just Thyman's setup. We mentioned on the formation lap that he looked as though in qualifying he had a bit too little rear downforce, so was sliding the car ever so slightly, and in these wet conditions that is one thing you do not want to do. Of course, when the virtual safety car came out, went into the back of the tyres. We don't know how close together they were when that happened. He had to pit, and then later on in the race just made a mistake, cooked his tyres. Would have been a lap down, would have still got a point if he'd have finished at least, and maybe even a couple more. Shame for him that he didn't, but there's a lot of drivers I will think they're thinking I could have got more out of that race. His Thyman's teammate, Zavio, of course, did manage to finish in the top 10. Could he have been on the podium, because he was not too far behind the top 3 when they made their first pit stop, so could have took advantage of Datamo and Neo's incident. Daniel in a similar situation. Gelato, he pitted early and had a couple of spins. He could have been up there as well. So many drivers, I think, will be thinking, oh, what might have been in that race. M-Short definitely won't be, though. Powell and the victory. So close to getting the hat-trick with the fastest lap as well, but not quite to be. Very ominous performance, I think, from XL today. They just looked on it in all conditions.
Yeah, they really did, and coming off the back of a win last time out as well, the highest scoring team in Canada, again the highest scoring team here as well, so it's on the up at the moment for XL after a slow start to the season. It's coming towards them, and obviously we head to Belgium next time out for the next round of the season in about a month's time, so tune into that one on League Racing TV. Before we sign off though today, Luke, who was your driver and who was your team of the day?
I always try to not go for the obvious choices. Team of the day, I definitely can't see past XL. And I think likewise for the driver of the day, I can't see past M-Short. He got pole position, got the victory, never really looked under lots of pressure. I do get the feeling, and I think it showed it at the end of the race, once he wasn't helping Neo stay within DRS, he was just able to drive away from the TTG driver, Datama. So a brilliant performance from him as well. There were plenty of others who did good races for the field. Dropia, he had quite a good race actually for the QVR Academy. You could even argue both of the QVR drivers, considering where they were in qualifying and where they were at the end of lap 1, the race was actually not too bad for them.
Yeah, it was a good recovery. I think this race was the race of damage limitation for a lot of teams. It definitely felt like that. And yeah, Kuhnblai definitely recovered well, and so did Verstappen to get inside the top 10 despite a drive through at the start of the race, but I fully agree with you. You can't look past Excel and M Short today. They were really in another league in terms of teams. No full team could get anywhere near Excel today. Dotamo was the only person that really put them under any sort of pressure. And then Scuba, unfortunately, was a little bit further down for TTG. So, yeah, Excel and M Short really shone today. But that is where we're going to round off the stream today, guys. Tune in about 15 minutes time for the main division then of the Esports Masters League. That is sure to be another great race. Hopefully you get some mixed conditions in that one as well. That would be really interesting to watch, and that is obviously commentated by James Head and Kuvia Daka, who's moved up into that division. Tune in to League Racing TV as well for the rest of the week. Divisions 2 and 3 for round 2 of Season 3 of TTML will be taking place tomorrow, and Divisions 4 and 5 will be taking place on Friday, and then next week we are back to usual with the Division 1 races on Tuesday, and then Divisions 2, 3, 4 and 5 on Thursday and Friday. We are back in about a month's time for the next round, the 7th round of the season at Belgium. That is sure to be another cracking race, and hopefully we get a bit more mixed conditions in that one as well, because this race was brilliant with the intermediate tyres. But that is where we're going to round off the stream today, guys. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in and showing your support for your fellow teams, and we will see you in about a month's time. From myself and Luke Etheridge, it is goodbye.